Hello, this is Fam Electric Ghost. We have Liza Oppenheimer on.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
So where are you actually right now?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm
And
just
you?
going to do. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in New Hampshire, but so let's start off with the intro. I'm Fam Electric Ghost. I'm an independent podcaster and electronic music producer. We've been doing this podcast since 2018. We just reached 25,000 listeners worldwide, and we've been interviewing indie artists. So I'd like to welcome Liza Oppenheimer um, to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So you're an indie synth pop artist, and we sent you a bunch of questions. Um, but I really like the vibe of your stuff. It kind of reminds me of the confessional nature of like Liz Phair,
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
then a little bit of PJ Harvey from like Rid of Me. But you have
Absolutely.
kind of a lighter side on it with a like comic kind of edge to it that's maybe a little, like so Liz Phair and PJ Harvey have a little more dark, but you have the darkness, but you have the kind of light comedy in it as well, which is kind of comic overtones, which is kind of, I think it's needed in this age.
Yeah, I'm happy that you pick up on that. It can be subtle.
Yeah, it's
And
cool.
thanks.
Well, I've always,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm happy that you say Liz Phair and PJ Harvey. That's great. Liz Phair was one of what was the album?
Exile and Guyville,
Exile and
Guyville.
Guyville.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a influence on me for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been, I'm a big progressive synth head. My heroes were like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and yes, Tony Banks, people like that, Bernie Worrell, Frank Zappa. But in the late '90s or the '90s, I started getting into like bands like Juliana Hatfield, the Blake Babies, Liz Phair, Tori Amos, PJ Harvey. There was a lot of movement in the indie female singer songwriter area.
Yeah,
And if
absolutely.
anybody that's into good music is like, wow, there's a lot of good music being written.
Yeah,
So I was kind of drawn to that. I actually thought that the women were doing a better job than some of the men.
naturally.
They were doing a lot of cool things, things that Lou Reed and Dylan had done, now women were doing.
Exactly.
And that was very refreshing and getting a different point of view. So I always start off, I see in your write-up when you started, but I always, ask this question because maybe, you professionally show on the scene in 2020, but when did you first get into music? Like, what age did you get into music and want to be a musician?
Well, it's a tough one. I started performing at a very young age. I was always into musical theater and just all the performing arts. I did a lot of, funny enough, I did a lot of musical theater growing up. I was in Guys and Dolls when when I was young, and Annie, um, and and I did all, I always sung, I kept getting these roles. I mean, I don't even know why. I really wasn't, a very talented singer per se. So, but I just kept getting these roles, so I kept going with it. And I think that's where it all sort of began, you know, character driven. My music was very character driven and stories, and I think, and then that sort of got me into. I did a little bit of acting, and that is a interesting business. But then I just kind of wanted to take back control of everything and just started writing my own music, having no real background of songwriting, and I was always into poetry and I just loved words, and I started just writing words and putting it to very simple melodies. And that's, I mean, that began maybe like 4 years ago or longer. I don't know.
That's
I always say
interesting.
four.
I always like to get into people's motivation in music, and 2 years talking to a lot of musicians, there is a camp of musicians that kind of theater.
Yeah.
A lot of singer songwriters that like their introduction into any kind of art was doing theater, and then they had a lot of times they had a love for poetry, and then they found the intersection between like theater, poetry, and music, and then kind of double down on doing the music instead. And it's interesting because
Right.
you get like Lady Gaga is a very theatrical, Bowie like artist, and I think
Right.
that's a cool place to be, because the music, if you see, you saw what Bowie did, was this ability to bring theater into music, opened up music where he would become Ziggy, he'd become
Right.
Aladdin Sane, he'd become the Thin White Duke, he'd create all these characters, and then he could change, and either the audience went with him or they didn't, but he had that ability to change, which is a lot of musicians are always looking for that, and sometimes they get pigeonholed because they don't take that kind of theatrical standpoint where they become that other person.
Right. Yeah. I think he was, fearless in that sense. He kept just reinventing himself, and I think it's important, being in entertainment business. Everybody, tries to, not everybody, but they say you need to, know your brand and pick your brand, and you need to be really specific. And I've heard that, like, from every corner. And I try to do what everybody, in the very beginning, it was like, okay, let me try to, do that. But, I think there's, you got to go with, I mean, as an artist, you just have to go with what you're feeling, and something may transpire and something will not, may not, but I don't think that you should hold back on reinventing or retrying. I don't think you should ever do that, because it's all about, evolving and
Yeah,
as human beings and artists. And
I think that's what some people that get into music, and they have got different motivations. I'm in my 50s. Everybody I got into music with when I was in 17, they all wanted to do the garage band and hoping they were going to get picked up, and then they got married and they stopped doing it. But I was kind of like, I'm a musician. I just kept on playing. I never stopped.
right,
And
right,
then this year, in the last year, I've been the biggest years in what I've been able to do with the podcast and all my other stuff as the ghost. And it just shows, like, if you just stick with it, if you're not into that overnight sensation, you do it because you love it, then
right.
things kind of come to you because you stick with what you want to do.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, most people quit,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, that's the thing. It's like I have so many friends that quit, and I was like, wow, you really should have stuck with it. But
Yeah, yeah. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to stick with it, believe me. When you're putting yourself out there so vulnerably, and you aren't, you're kind of getting, you haven't been exposed to huge crowds yet where you have your fan base and it's all just, you know, people aren't responding to, at all. And it's a little bit of like a,
yeah, it's hard.
juvenile, like my heart is crushed. But, the part, if you like just get through that bit,
Well, I think it's every singer songwriter, the appeal is kind of what you're doing is very, very cool. And what I've always tried to do is, because I had a love of singer songwriters. From an early age, I grew up in the age, I was a child of the '70s, and that's all you ever heard. With the Carole Kings, the Carpenters,
right.
people, Dylan. You saw people who were actually changing the world with their music because they were telling stories that were personal, or
Yeah.
able to identify with people with empathy. And so it wasn't just a hit, it was like songs, Harley Simon, and they would have songs that were like, really, that's a part of their life. They're being
Right.
honest and they're revealing themselves. And you can get hurt when you do that. And you open yourself up to a lot of criticism and all kinds of other things. But I always felt that was the music that I really hit my heart, was when somebody actually took their own personal life or their failings or what was going on in their life and took it and turned it into art.
Right. Well, and I mean, there isn't really much else that can move people like that besides the truth and somebody actually kind of putting their heart on the slab for everybody to dissect,
But it's interesting that you talk about theater and film. In theater and film, you get a guy actors like De Niro and Pacino. They kind of do this, character. What was it? A method acting where they become the character. They live the character. And in music that happens too. Like Bowie was that, and Lady Gaga does that. But it's just
Right.
interesting when you take that intersection of, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna talk about my own personal failures. I'm gonna have this kind of inner monologue that you talk about, and
Right.
being able to do that, it's hard, to do that in front of a crowd, and kind of you have to kind of put yourself into that frame of mind where you're that other me. You look in the looking glass and you're that other version of yourself, or maybe that's your real self, and you're finally letting people see it.
Right, right. Yeah. Um, yeah,
So,
I think it's all of the above for sure.
yeah,
I
because I was
think.
listening to your music. I was listening to Stink Eye. I was listening to your EP, and I was very drawn into what you're doing, because it's this kind of character driven, personal driven, like your best foreign language film. You've got a lot of
Yeah.
good tracks on that, and I know your new album, your new track is really good. We're going to get into that, but I really like what you did on your EP, because I like to hear full, like, thoughts. Like, I think musicians are like authors, so when I got to see a complete thought with that. Um, with your full project there, but Stink Eye is really brilliant. I like to work on that. So maybe we'll get
Thank you.
into that, but I do want to talk about some of the other things I get into. But so
Yeah.
you realized that you had a talent for music, like what, in the last couple of years, that you decided that you would go on and actually fully develop your songs. Like, that's in the last 4 years, or is that like in the last
Well,
2 years?
I think I'm still waiting for that realization, but I just keep on doing
Yeah, yeah.
it. You know, I don't know. I think uh I don't think there was that moment. Maybe it'll come. I just keep doing
You
it,
just
you
keep
know.
out.
Just
You're in the
keep
process.
throwing the darts at the board, you know. One will stick, hopefully.
Well, that's
Um,
interesting when you finally pick up like the pen as a writer, and you get into like songcraft, and you start saying, I am going to create my own style. And I hear your style. I mean, I hear it. And you're probably still developing because you're a new artist. But yeah, you do have this really interesting way of bringing in this electronic. And I'm a big electronic guy. I grew up, like, again, with the new wave, Duran Duran,
right,
like, Flock of Seagulls, the Brian Eno type of mentality of this, this very escapist, synth wave, new romantic, and I always felt that was a really cool place to be, because you could just go anywhere. You could take funk, you
right,
could take disco, you could take rock, and all those bands had rock elements, they had punk elements, they had jazz elements. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this genre. It's not very limiting.
right.
I,
It's endless. I mean, that's exactly how you make music from your bedroom now. You know, I didn't really know much about, music theory or or even how, I started to write melodies, just not knowing what I was doing at all, And I think with the electronic stuff, I started just doing some demo stuff and like half songs and just, I use Logic, so you go on there, it's like
Yeah, I was going to
endless
ask, like,
possibilities.
what kind of DAW you use, because some people start with like GarageBand, and then they just
Oh yeah,
take
yeah,
voice
yeah.
memos, and then they start figuring out how to put stuff, and then they realize the limitations, and they move into Logic, or they go into Ableton or FL Studio, and then once they get like a MIDI controller and they get a little keyboard, then they realize, wow, I can actually put the drum tracks down, I can do the bass, I can do the pads, I can kind of map out this whole thing. Is that
Right,
kind of what
right.
happened to
It's
you,
brilliant.
that you found out that you could actually get a PC and a MIDI controller and then actually a mic and start doing your demos, or do you bring more rough demos to a producer? Hello, you still there? Oh, I don't hear you. Did we lose you? Your signal? I guess I was talking about, like, how you use your DAW, and how much of the work you do yourself for your demos before you get to a producer. How much do you kind of craft your song?
Well, the EP, I did start with GarageBand first, and I all of those songs I had, some were fully written, some were half songs. One song was not Love Me hadn't been written yet, but I do demos, and to be honest with you, I am not the best producer. I am just like, I get so overwhelmed with all the things. And so I will do on a MIDI, I will just, pick the notes, you know what I mean? And it'll be really basic. I mean, it would be fun maybe eventually to release the demos of Best Foreign Language Film, my EP, because I recently went back to see, just to like clean my computer out, and I had all these demos of all those songs, and it was really sort of sweet to hear where it started, and where it went with the producer. So,
well, as a music fan, I always do like to look at the original demos that artist has, because demos, a lot of artists can be very self-critical of their original work, and then fans can find a lot of beauty in the simplistic nature of some demos.
Oh yeah.
Or the raw nature and honesty of a demo. The one thing I would always say is like, you don't necessarily have to be the greatest guitar player or keyboardist in the world if you put down a song that has a lot of feeling. It's the feeling and the voice of that artist that can make that. You don't have to be Jimmy Page, you don't have to be Hendrix, you don't have to be Tori Amos, you don't have to be a Diana Ross. You don't have to have that capability to do something that can really pull the heartstrings. And some people, don't realize that, the nature of the beauty of their own music.
Right. I agree with you. I agree. And I thought about that recently, about just maybe just putting some songs out that I've just done,
Yeah, maybe put them on SoundCloud or something so people could check them out.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I think the whole point of the exercise is to move people, entertainment, music, movies, everything. It's not really, it's great when everything, it looks professional and sounds professional, but it's really about moving people. That's all it is. It's making people feel something. This is why people listen to music. This is why people go to movies, to feel something and get out of their own, mind for a minute.
I mean, I was watching a documentary on Elton John and the Yellow Brick Road album, and it was interesting that they had this house where they would put together the tracks in France, and a lot of times it was the first or second take that was the one they put on the record, even if they did like 10 or 12, because they go back and say, that one's the most honest.
Right.
And I think sometimes in this world of the DAW and people trying to make everything perfect and pitch perfect and BPM perfect, and they forget that some of the greatest albums ever done, it's like the first or second take.
Right. It's so true. It's so true. I think, I think a lot of pop music now is just the opposite of that, as good as it is and popular as it is. It's a lot of like, technical perfection, which I sometimes get a bit turned off by. I kind of want I want to hear the grit. I want to hear
that's what I like
the
about
mistakes.
Your work, what I like about it is you got that raw nature, kind of like a punk aesthetic that I hear, kind of like the PJ Harvey in the Liz Phair. And that the cool thing about those artists, they have this kind of lo-fi mentality as singer-songwriters, where the earlier Liz Phair, like Exile from Guyville, is not
so good.
It's not like a perfect recording. Today, a lot of producers would say, well, that's just demos. And I've actually and I've heard the girly sound, and those are demos. the original but the original girly sound and what ended up being on that album, they're not that far off. I mean, a lot of the songs are like pretty close to the demo. And I think it's the nature of that kind of less produced, willing to have the happy accidents that I call. When you do something more raw and you have a happy accident, a chord change you weren't supposed to make, or you change the key, or you make a little bit of a mistake on the rhythm, that kind of like drives the character of the music.
Right.
And when you EQ or you produce that out, it becomes too antiseptic. It sounds perfect.
Right. It's too clean. You're right.
Yeah, it's too clean. It's like going to be PJ Harvey. It's not going to be like the Clash. People you hear a lot of these rock bands today, and I always remind the kids that I work with, some kids, like, go listen to the first couple Clash records and tell me that you really need to be cleaning this up and doing. Because if you really want to sound raw, you look at that. That has like real power, you know.
Well, yeah, maybe there's a moment, maybe with all this going on, maybe there's a time for to get back to that, get back to
Yeah, I love
music that's more like that, because I was trying to figure out where music was headed, and it can't get more perfect. It's like perfect,
yeah.
it's like scientific, which is great, but I wonder I wonder if there's a time now to everybody's just stripping down,
Well, I think because some people can't get in the studio and people are in their bedrooms and their
Right.
garages, the last couple of bands I've interviewed in the last 3 weeks have been kind of going toward, and maybe I should stop trying to make it as perfect. You know, maybe I should kind of go back to that kind of, Paul Westerberg, replacement, like an early U2, early REM,
Yeah.
like the old indie label thing back in the 90s. I grew up with, like, when REM, before they went to Warner's, and they had Michael Stipe, and you didn't really know what he was saying.
Right.
But I was like, well, those early REM albums, I kind of like those, because
Oh
before
yeah, yeah.
before he really started enunciating his words, there was this mystery that you was like,
Uh-huh.
okay, what is he really saying? And it was kind of cool that you didn't know, and it was kind of like, I didn't need it to be so clear that when he got to Warner Brothers, then it was really clear. It's not that those songs are bad, but I always thought the IRS stuff was better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I like your taste. I do. Yeah, it's funny because I went back recently. I was having a moment and I went back to Exile in Guyville. It's funny that you mentioned that first. Um, because I wanted to feel uh okay again about, because I mean her, even her voice on it is so just like
Yeah,
garage,
yeah,
and I love it, and there's nothing about it that turns me off about her voice, even though it doesn't sound perfect at all,
no,
and I've never claimed to be a singer,
yeah, yeah.
I'm more of like a vocalist and a writer, and I just try to best portray my point of view of the world, but yeah, that album really
Yeah. I mean,
inspired me.
I really do hear that. What I loved about Liz is she didn't care. She wasn't trying to be like pitch perfect female voice.
Yeah.
She was going for the that. Look at Dylan. Dylan doesn't have the most perfect singing voice, and I could point out some examples of Dylan actually being able to sing really good, like Nashville Skyline. He actually did some really good vocal work, and a lot of people always talk about how his work is not that great. But Dylan can actually make his voice sound really good when he wants to,
Right.
like what traditional singer. But a lot of times he didn't want to do it that way. He wanted to do something that was really different and focus really on the lyrics, focus on the song more than the voice. And I think that's what singer songwriters do. And when you get artists like Liz Fair and artists like yourself, you can get to the heart of what you're doing because you're telling a story, and you have your own sensibilities about how you do it, and that's more important than trying to do a beat driven, like clip driven music. You think you're a singer songwriter, so you're telling a story.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to go that route for a while, tried to, research what the scientific, equation was. And,
Go back.
I haven't put those songs out. So, um,
Well, I like Stink Eye and everything that's on your EP is like what I like to hear. Like I like Juliana Hatfield and the Blake Babies. They do the same kind of thing. If you ever been into them, and I just really like, you know, lately. I mean, I'm very heavy into a lot of female singer songwriters. Like Sleater Kinney and Wild Flag and a lot of stuff. It's just to me, it's coming from a different place. And I've been a progressive musician, right? I like to mix jazz and funk and rock, and so anybody that's doing something unique is a draw for me.
right.
And so when a lot of the people I interview, I happen to interview like 70% of the people I interview are female artists, because it seems like the female artists are actually doing stuff that's different. They're actually doing
Yeah.
a lot of cool work. More female writers and artists are doing innovative work right now, in my opinion, than some of the male counterparts. And I'm like, okay, well, it'd be cool to see some guys do something that I really dig, but but there are
You're
more women doing things
like
I dig right now.
you're like, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong, please.
Yeah. So when you get to your own influences and reference points, who would you say are your biggest inspirations, or people that you would like name check as inspirations?
Bowie, Bowie, Blondie.
Yeah, I hear Blondie too. Yeah.
Dylan was a huge. I mean, my dad played Dylan growing up, like all the time. Huge influence, with words, just words and music. I started just doing, spoken word and over just sounds. That's how it began. But yeah, I was biggest influence is definitely Bowie. I don't know why. It's just
Yeah,
he.
Bowie's a big draw.
I think the humor of it all, and the my favorite Bowie album is Hunky Dory.
Oh,
I don't know.
that's a great album.
It's just so good. It's just so good.
I was listening to his work with Lou Reed on Transformer,
Yeah.
and I just like that kind of intersection between Lou and Bowie, because Lou was like a Dylan. He's like
Yeah.
the Velvet Underground stuff was like phenomenal. I have all the Velvet stuff, but he had this kind of dry sense of humor and this kind of way to document the life in New York, and maybe parts of life
Right.
that people normally wouldn't want to put in song. And then I was like, wow, he's doing a Dylan, but he's bringing it to like the dark side of the street. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. And then when he interfaced with Bowie, kind of brought that glam thing in too. And so he had this
Right.
kind of glam, dark edge of the street, and it's really interesting. And it was a big draw for me for a lot of years. Like everything that Bowie and Lou did, they're the
Yeah.
two guys I was really drawn into, and still, probably get a lot of inspiration from.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. It's just storytelling. That's what gets it for me. It's just storytelling. And I think Bowie had a track called, have you heard the Please Mr. Gravedigger?
Oh yeah, that's a good track.
And it's just uh whatever ambient, actually it's not even music, it's just sort
Yeah,
of sound effects of him just going da 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 da, great please miss great da 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 da, and it's just like, so like, it just floors me, because I'm just like that. It just moves, yeah, it moves me, I don't know.
yeah. I was reading about
So
your stream of consciousness. You'd like to do kind of a stream of consciousness, or like just kind of like, yeah. You're saying like your song "Love Me" was like stream of consciousness, and that's really interesting because a lot of what I do is I like to do improvisational, like jazz fusion stream of consciousness. When I do lyric writing, I just
yeah.
roll the tape and then kind of feel whatever it's going to be. And I've always been inspired. I have an alter ego, Josephine Electric, that I create with all my vocoders.
Right, cool,
so
cool.
so I kind of been for years. I made my fictional lead singer, Josephine Electric, which is the female kind of part of me, create these stories, and
That's awesome.
she just gets into this character. And I can use this technology instead of using it to do like pitch perfect work. I used it to transform my voice into like a theater character, like Ziggy, or like Prince's Camille, or
Yeah.
like Funkadelic Sir Nose. I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. So I kind of like read up on what George Clinton did with Sir Nose, what Finch did with Camille. And I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Because I really didn't like my male voice. So I said, well, I'm going to create this female version of myself and then get into her character and make her the lead singer of my band.
That's amazing. I love that. But by the way, you do have a great voice. I don't know about the singing, but you have a really great male voice.
Well, I use
So
it.
maybe
I use it
maybe you should
probably.
reconsider.
I do. I use it like maybe 10% of the Phantom Electric Ghost songs have my voice, and
Yeah.
90% have Josephine's voice, which is my voice pitched up to soprano. But yeah, it's just my choice. I've been lately getting more comfortable. I've released a bunch of songs that actually have my closer to my male voice on it. But yeah, it's just kind of like the character thing. And I was just really interested in your stream of consciousness style, like what your write up. So maybe you want to talk more about like how you approach that in some of your songs. Of
Yeah, well, it's really does start with a few lines usually. Like I have my notes on my phone, the app, whatever, iPhone app on notes. Like every day I'm just constantly writing down like 2 lines, 4 lines. So, there's just probably like thousands of notes. But then once in a while something will hit me and then I'll take it and I'll write the words out and then I'll start to sort and then I use my voice notes and then I start to um record melodies. And so I definitely go back and look for things. Like if I have 4 lines that I love and I'm like, okay, I feel like I I wrote something similar to that. Let me go see if I can find. And then it sort of shapes together. I mean, some of my songs are actual like letters to people.
yeah,
Some of my stuff is, you know, I don't know. I've always just been so poetry drawn, and I don't know why. I don't know if you agree, but there's always been my upbringing or growing up is not upbringing, not family, but like the world I grew up in was like, oh, like poetry is really, cheesy or, and so I never really, but once they started putting it to music, it was like, oh, I get it. I found a way to do this
yeah,
where people aren't cringing. So I'm not,
yeah.
I would love to just write pure poetry. That would be, maybe that's something I'll do one day. I'll write a poetry book. But, but yeah, that's how it starts. Usually I'm not a very technical writer. I'm more of just a voice note, melody, and iPhone note sort of, jotting down ideas and then putting them together.
Well, it's interesting because I was reading about like "Love Me" is a stream of consciousness song that you wrote up. You said it was like an email that you never planned to send, which is kind
Yeah.
of like a Motown theme. There's like the letter never sent. Tons of Motown acts like soul songs kind of have that idea that I'm gonna write
Yeah.
this letter. The Shy Lights. You like all the Marvin Gaye. You can find tons of like real famous old soul songs that kind of start with that idea. Um,
Right.
but it's interesting with the stream of consciousness how you can do that. I was watching like a documentary on Tom Petty, and he
Yeah.
was saying that a lot of the stuff he would come up with, a lot of the guys in the band didn't realize that he was just kind of winging it. Like there was a documentary I saw where they say even losers get lucky sometimes. He that song. He actually was just humming out the melody. He didn't know what the words were going to be. Then he told the band, "Well, just go into it, right?" Because they would play live as a full piece when they were putting stuff down, and they just
Right.
started doing it. And he kind of hummed out the melody on the first one take. Then on the second take, he said, "Okay, I'm just going to go for it," and he threw that line out. And then
Yeah.
it kind of built the whole song, and then it kind of stream of consciousness went together. And
That's
and
amazing. That's
and
amazing.
I think that's what a lot of people get. Like all these guys are really doing all this deep work, and it is deep work probably in their head, to be a guy like that. But a lot of music is that kind of hit or miss. You're laying something down and you get the feeling, and it just works. It kind of comes out of the muse. A lot of poets talk about the muse. And, I took
Right.
courses when I was in college about the romantic poets like Blake and Tennyson and Wordsworth, and a lot of those guys, like they would write about, well, how did they do what they were doing, and they would say, well, like a lot of it just comes from the muse, which means it kind of comes from the middle of the thin air.
Well, it's funny. I think that's true. However, I think that the work is like I think that I've been working at this my whole life. Like the work has been done. It's like 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that magic seems to come where you think of something or you write a song in like a minute, But all the work has been like 10 years of leading up to that moment and putting everything in line, putting your thoughts in line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a lot
And
of
it
stuff is
and
like
the
in your head.
magic,
Yeah.
yeah, it's already there. Like people, they say, oh, it was like, oh, they wrote a song in a day. But no, it was like probably 10 years in the making of
Well,
that
it's, yeah, it's
song
all your
of
life.
of like your subconscious thinking about the idea and thinking about, and sort of challenging yourself and why this and this and this. So
Well, I
that's my
think, yeah,
theory.
I think it's your life experience. As a musician, every musician, from the the singer to the drummer, they take their life experience, and then suddenly what happens is they can hear a collection of notes together, and then
Right.
suddenly, like, 'cause, like, when I played with bands, I'd write a bass line, but then when I brought the whole song to the band, and I had my chords on my piano, and then the bass player said, "Well, this really sounds better, or this fits. I hear this," and I was kind of,
Right.
okay. Well, I'll go with what the bass player, because he's a bass player, and he just like took it and he interprets it, and the drummer would interpret it. Everybody interprets like what it feels like, and it's their whole life experience up to that point. And then people act like, well, it came out of nowhere. But like you said, it isn't really nowhere. It's all the work you've been doing.
Right. Yeah. It's a lifetime's worth of work, I swear.
And it might
And I
seem like,
think that
yeah,
has to do with faith. I think
yeah,
you have to have faith in yourself and that, because like sometimes I'm like, whoa, that was shit. You know what I mean? What the hell? I'm literally lost all faith in myself to write a song, like, and you go through that, but that's part of the work that leads up to the great idea.
yeah. For every idea that doesn't work, you've got the ideas that do work. And then the thing with songwriters, you always take the risk, you know, that you put like all this down, like all your notebooks and your scraps. And if you're like a player like me, like I got tapes and tapes and tapes of stuff, and then
All
you
right.
kind of go through them and say, okay, well, this works with that. I was watching. I always like reading about musicians. I was reading about Frank Zappa, and Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, like a great band. He used to tape like everything he did. Right, he would just have tape rolling all the time. They'd go home, and then start like splicing performances from one year or one thing with the next, and say, well, this is where I hear the groove. And so
Right.
he'd just take all that life's work, and then find the best moments and say, oh, here's the song. Because he's like,
Wow.
and he would just, a lot. I've actually read about a lot of musicians actually just recording all the time and running tapes. Like Neil Young was famous for doing that. Um, yeah, they just put stuff down, and then they find the inspiration and stuff that they forgot about, or they just put down and they listen to it one day and say, oh, there it is, and then they actually find the song because they just put it down.
Yeah, that's great. I've tried to go through my voice notes. It's hard though. It's hard to listen. I wish there was a better, I don't know, maybe somebody has a suggestion for that. Like a better app for voice noting and organizing. Because like I just, I have all these voice notes. They
Yeah,
could
they
be
could go through it.
huge hits in there.
Well, I guess you just have to throw them all into like Logic or throw them into your thing, and then kind of start splicing them when you can. Is it
Yeah.
better if they made like a better iPhone app that maybe could do that for you, so you could bring the whole thing into Logic or Ableton, and just easily,
Yeah.
separate them out.
Maybe I'll make an app for that.
It's a good idea. I'm always looking for something, like especially in this Corona time. I'm always looking for a collaborative type of thing, like a collaborative DAW. So like
Yeah.
if you were sitting in Los Angeles and somebody's in Denver and then I'm in New Hampshire, the drummer could be like in Denver, you could be in LA, and I'd be here, and we could all go into a session, and it's like
Oh
we're in
yeah.
studio and actually do something live. Which I
There's an
think,
idea.
yeah, but I've been thinking that's a really good.
You shouldn't publish this. Someone's gonna steal that idea and
Well,
make
I'm
billions
a
of dollars.
well, I'm an IT guy myself, my main gig,
Oh, there you go.
but my whole thing is like, that is something that's really needed. So I'll throw it out there for free. So any developer listening, that's what you should work
Yeah.
on.
So noble of you. I like it.
Um, yeah. So you've got some really cool material, but Stink Eye is your latest song, and you say it's like an unapologetic, like talk about your inner monologue and that dead end journey. So maybe kind of talk about like how you came to that song.
Well, LA is a big theme in my music. Um, but that came about my co-writer and producer Jared Walker, he goes by Black Ferrari. He actually, it's the first time that actually the first time we ever worked together. And a friend introduced us, and we just kind of decided to write, and he actually had that sort of groove already. And so then I just sat down in Logic with the headphones and the microphone, and I literally it was just ad lib everything.
So your riff stream of consciousness type of thing.
Yeah, it was like that, and but I did it maybe about 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
So it would go like da, 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 and like little bits like faces, da, 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
And it really started like that, and it was a really cool experience because I had never done that over a track before. I'd always just come up with stuff and sort of like put my finger on the board and try to figure out melodies, but this was a really cool track, and he like left the room, and I just sat there with headphones and a microphone, and we did that, and then we left it for a while, and again this LA theme kept popping up, and I think we got together a few more times, and I really wanted to, the story is pretty clear. I wanted to sort of talk about what it is to be a failure in LA, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And to not make it a sad story, even though it kind of is, but to be like, this is what I've done, this is who I am, and kind of take the piss out of myself, I'm a big believer in that. It's like, we all try to keep up images, especially in the social media world, and I kind of wanted to write a song that was just like, yep, not going too well.
Yeah, that kind
So
of reminds me like a Velvet Underground, like a modern Velvet Underground approach, because I mean that's what Lou used to really be able to do that, and some people today seem to be kind of scared of that, that kind of level of honesty. They like to build up all this bravado,
right.
and they created all these characters that are kind of like, not as much of a, like, more not really the truth. And it's cool to actually find you doing more of a truth tell in your music, and being honest about your feelings, and a lot of people don't like to talk about that. Maybe they'll talk about like a failed romance, and that's kind of like everybody has heard that like a million times, but they kind of get into the deeper dynamics of your own like psyche, of your own personal life. That's a little harder to do.
I wonder why that is. I wonder, because you're right, it's easier to sort of express your pain over a breakup, like,
yeah,
but it's really hard to express the pain over failing. I think you're right. I don't know. It would be interesting to sort of
well, I
hear
think
another.
I mean, Johnny Cash was good at doing that. He would get into his personal feelings, and that was the kind of his appeal, that he would, this kind of man in black, he's going toward the dark side of life. He had, problems. He was pretty open with his issues with drug addiction and, all kinds of addictions he had, and he would put it into his music. And it's kind of like he had this struggle through his whole life, and it's in his music, and it's really honest. And that's the kind of country music I kind of like. Well, that to me is the measure of that genre. Is, can you be as honest as Johnny?
Right. I like that.
And if you're not, then I'm like, I don't know if I'm really gonna listen, because like that's like the standard bearer to me.
I love that. I'm gonna start thinking about that. I'm gonna write that quote down.
But it's like that's what I've always driven into that, because I'm looking for, I think listening to music's like reading the great American novel. When you get a really good songwriter, then you really can be moved.
Right.
And maybe not just move your feet, but like move your soul, move your heart. Because, that's kind of what I'm after when I listen to music. Some people, they want something to exercise to. They want something to kind of zone out to, and maybe they don't need that. But I'm kind of a music fan that loves to listen to somebody, talking about like a love letter to failure.
Right. No, I think that's that, like I said, yeah, I want to laugh or cry. If it's not one of those, I don't,
Yeah.
I find myself not so interested. That's how I feel about music. But maybe I'm self-indulgent that way. I don't know.
No, I think it's a good place to be because I think people want that, And what I like about it is that you kind of have this laugh out loud inappropriateness, but also this kind of darkness. So you're kind of getting this kind of Graham Parsons, Johnny Cash, Liz Phair honesty, but you got this kind of quirkiness, and then you got this new wave sound. It kind of reminds me of Blondie and Moving Pictures and bands like that, and that's cool because I like genre bending. You know,
Yeah, yeah, me too, me too. I always try to figure out a way to sort of,
yeah, that,
well, at first I was like, it's just genreless, and as I was saying, it was very genreless before. I mean, the demos of this EP were just, and I would send it out to people and labels and managers, and um, everybody, nobody got it. They're like, where do we put you? So I ended up just doing it like on, independently with a producer. Um, but but having had that experience, I want to own that more now. I want to be like, okay, well, it was genreless to start with,
yeah,
and then I kind of tailored it up to be a little bit more, palatable for a genre or whatever. But I'm wondering maybe now what would be like to just smash all the rules and see what happens then. I don't know.
yeah. That's kind of when I started. I created the expansive sound experiments as this kind of genreless thing.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you're into jazz or progressive music, it's always been this kind of combination of funk and rock and psychedelia and classical. And that's kind of where as a keyboardist, that's where I always wanted to kind of go because it gives you more to work with. If you
Right.
if you can kind of go in a jazz way where you're moving toward like Miles Davis stuff, and then you can move toward like Parliament, and then you could do some stuff like Yes, then you can go anywhere, and then
Right.
nobody can really pin you down. Because if you say, well, like it's expansive, what does that mean? It means it's everything.
Right.
And then they say, what does that mean? It means what I said. It's like it's everything.
Yeah.
um, and so then you can't be pinned down, and people get like, wow, it's gonna be, I guess it's gonna be everything.
Well, I think it's cool. I think it's good to broaden people's minds a little bit. Maybe there's a whole genre that we don't know about that could be discovered through doing genreless music.
Well,
Who
more and more
knows?
people seem to be doing it. More bands that I talk to are kind of. I just talked to a band that had like a hip hop vocalist lyricist, and they were a psychedelic like progressive rock unit,
Oh,
and
cool.
they were playing like Pink Floyd like rock with like this hip hop vocal, this kind of like a Jay-Z vocal over Pink Floyd
Oh,
type
that's
of music.
cool.
And I'm like, that's cool. And then that's what you find when you look in the indie genre, and that's they were running into issues where nobody knew where to put them, but that's kind of like, well, this is where they want to be, and you find your audience worldwide. You get people. The one cool thing about the industry today is like you get out there on Spotify, you get on SoundCloud, somebody in Berlin hears it, and then you get invited to go to Berlin.
Right.
Or you get invited.
Right.
People dig you, and you kind of got to be willing. If we weren't in COVID, to go where your audience is, because that's kind of like we finally got a booking agent after all these years, and now we can't go to Europe because they won't let us in.
Oh man. Yeah.
But we've been able to do other things, but we're happy. But eventually, when it opens up, then that's what our goal is, because it seems like the European audiences and the Asian audiences are more into stuff that's different. If you go
Yeah.
to Berlin, you can do the kind of work you're doing. You can do the kind of work I'm doing. If you go to like Seoul, you go to Tokyo, people are into the kind of stuff we're doing because the fans there are more open.
Yeah.
To
I've been told that too. Yeah, I have a few friends and all over Europe. And they always say like, come to do this in London or,
Yeah, yeah.
Berlin.
Well, it's interesting.
So,
People forget it. Hendrix had to go to London to get discovered. And he'd been playing on what they call the Chitlin circuit forever behind Isley Brothers and Little Richard, and he couldn't get traction. So he actually went to England, and Chaz Chandler, the manager of the Animals, presented him. And then Paul McCartney and Lennon saw him playing in a club in London, and boom, it was all set. But he'd been struggling through the early 60s, like 63, 60, before 66. He's like one of the best guitarists in the world. And he was just back in like the Ozzy Brothers. Not that that's a bad gig, but it's not what he ended up doing.
right, right.
So it's interesting that he had to go to London, and he had been in the U.S. playing the same way in like 64, but he had to go to London in 66 to get found.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
So people that think like the best guitar player in the whole world couldn't get appreciated in America until he went to London.
Right. That's amazing. That's crazy, right?
Yeah, so that's why you shouldn't be discouraged, because like what you have to really create no boundaries for your art. And the cool thing I think about the streaming services, like the benefit is that the whole world gets to hear you, and
Right.
then you never know if some manager or some art, like some guy looking for talent suddenly hears this podcast, listen to your music, and then boom, you get another opportunity. And that's kind of like why I do this show, because I think there needs to be more opportunities for artists to be fully understood and their work put out there.
Right. Yeah, I think it's great. It's been a pleasure. I love that you're doing this. I was listening to the one that you sent me. I think it's a great idea. It's
Well,
exciting. It's always nice to talk to someone who's interested in the music and yeah,
so were you doing live shows before COVID? Have you been doing anything in your area, or did it all kind of happen right when you wanted to do that?
I I've performed all over LA a bit. But that was before my EP came out. But I did have a couple shows lined up and then COVID hit. But um yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Good
story. Everybody's
old
telling me
COVID.
that story.
But yeah, I
Are you,
gotta you
yeah.
gotta innovate and figure out how to perform. Obviously
Have you
camera.
found have you found new ways to you know go online and do like performances through live streaming, or linking up with what's going on like on YouTube and Vimeo and
Yeah,
all that.
I've been mostly doing little videos, like music video clips.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm kind of like playing with some ideas on how to do that, which I won't say yet, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking about starting something that will
Don't do it.
be more of a performance thing. Because it's a great medium to get stuff out right now. People.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I think like even like movies and shows are the productions are being shut down, so people are gonna need entertainment.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm working on that. I want to try to figure out a way to do it.
Are you
That's
thinking of bringing your theatrical training to bear, like doing a more Bowie-esque theatrical kind of stagecraft? But it seems like
maybe, yeah,
seems like your pictures are kind of in the vein is that you have like the stagecraft to your photos and your Instagram that has a vibe. It would you continue that kind of vibe in how you perform or do videos?
absolutely. I'm always just sort of doing and like the ideas that come into my head, like because I mean, just art. Period. I love expressing a story through a photo. So yeah, absolutely. I think before when I had all these shows lined up this year, I was thinking of what to do on stage that could sort of be a like a mini play, but singing my
Yeah.
songs. So I'm definitely working on how to do that at home.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
it's
think that
interesting. Yeah.
it's currently coming out in photos because I just keep thinking. So now I have to transmute that to be a live show, pretty
Well, I
much.
love your photos. I
So.
think you really capture like a whole scene. You've got this vibe that's very cool. It's kind of it's kind of like I said, it's Bowie-esque. It's Lady Gaga-like. It's kind of got that Liz Phair attitude and the PJ Harvey kind of vibe too, which she has a lot of that attitude that I see you kind of continuing, and that's cool. I always like that kind of punkish attitude, um, but
Thank you, thank you.
it's just I've been doing like live performance before all this stuff happened in my bedroom studio. I was always doing Facebook Lives and Twitches, and I've just been buying more equipment just because I've been getting more and more stuff to do it. But yeah, there's a lot you can do from home with some of the stuff that's out there now. There's a lot of you can do multiple camera shots with some lower priced equipment. They can do automatic switching of cameras, and you can do all
Oh,
kinds
I
of
know.
yeah. So I mean, I've been doing like live little shows, and sometimes I'll get only 3, 4, 5,000 people listening. Um, and that's pretty cool because when I go to New York, I was doing clubs that are only at 300 or 400, and I was like, wow,
Right.
that's a lot bigger than what I was doing in New York.
Wow, that's
But
so cool though, isn't it? It's
yeah,
really it's amazing. It's
yeah. I mean, you're surprised. It's like if you start doing it, and it's a cool way to kind of practice for the real world. If you can get if you can do a live show on Facebook or Twitch, and you start to perfect it, when you go to bring it on the road, you can just kind of replicate what you were doing.
right.
And you live can kind of get some chops in. Being a man or one person band, um, I'm able to kind of just like work out a lot of ideas. And the technology for doing streaming now is getting better and better. Because we're actually even moving to a video version of this podcast. Well, we kind of do it simultaneously. We have the ability to do video interviews now, and
Oh,
we're
cool.
moving into that because there are some bands that have been asking us about that, and the ability to do stuff live. Like when we do a video podcast, it actually live streams to on our Facebook. And
Oh, wow, yeah.
so people who have been up for years, we've been doing these audio ones, and then people say, well, it's not live, and they kind of wanted it to be live, but it's not. And the video one is. And so then, but some bands have found out, well, maybe I don't want to do it that way.
You're like, can you text me a photo of what you look like right now?
Yeah,
Because
they don't want it in a video because they want to be like in their pajamas, and they don't want to care about their looks. They don't want people to see that they haven't gotten any sleep, and they haven't been and they like doing the audio one because then they won't have to worry so much. So yeah, there's different
yeah.
pros and cons to doing the video versus the audio.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm vain enough for that. So if you want to test that on me, we can do a video interview in the future.
Yeah, we're trying to get more people. We've done about 4 of them so far compared to like the 300 we've done the other way.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, video is fun. I mean, video live is fun. I get why people. I haven't done like anything live on Instagram or anything, but I get people wanting me to. But it's a fascinating thing, that you can just pick up and just be live for the world in like 2 seconds. I'm sure
yeah,
it's
yeah. I mean,
discouraging for some people because it's like, oh my God, what if I say something or
well, you
but
have to kind of
it's
build a stagecraft. When I go Ghost Live, I have an LED costume with an LED face mask and my Phantom mask and my LED shoes and my purple light, and it's a totally different thing.
amazing.
And it's cool stuff. I mean, I use a Roland Go mixer that allows me to get a good soundboard signal off all my rig, and there's a lot of cool stuff you can do that the technology has gotten cheaper to be able to do pretty good audio and pretty decent video. You just got you get some tripods and stuff that's to hold stuff in a good angle. But yeah, I've been compared to going to New York, the only thing I would say the live performance on the net that's missing is the feedback from the crowd. Because like when you
Right.
go to New York, I've been to Boston and New York, and it's that feedback that when you got that 400 people in the crowd in a small venue, that kind of drives, I think, an artist. But I have found that I like getting that crowd feedback. Well, not force me, but get me into the mood to play, based on what the crowd's doing.
Right.
And that if you don't
Right.
have that
Right.
feedback, you're kind of doing it. Okay, I'm gonna do this, but you're not really getting like real time feedback, so it makes it a little bit harder.
Yeah, there could be pros and cons to that, because what if you have a audience that isn't reacting?
Yeah, yeah. Like they got to make a way for me to see those lights like come into my
Yeah,
earpiece as like claps or something.
right.
So like I
Or
can
just
hear the lights and claps, and I know
or just
people are
video, do like some video shot and put some claps in there
yeah,
wherever
yeah,
you want it.
yeah.
There you
So at
go.
least you could hear the crowd or something, so you know that they're digging it or something. There's a way to do it. I haven't seen anybody try that yet, but
Yeah.
that'd be kind of cool because there'll be other ways. I mean, you just do it like you rehearsed it, and then you're kind of okay, whatever. It's going to be what it is.
Right, right.
um,
Yeah.
so what do you think about the future of music? In terms of like where do you think it's going? Um,
Um, like you mean in terms of in style
but it's a lot of ways you can look
or
at it. Like you can look at it from like the streaming service versus being on a label, or the
oh yeah.
idea of like what how music is valued or not valued, by this generation. You know, as fans, like a lot of bands right now, because they can't play shows. That's how bands make money. And if you can't
Oh yeah,
get
yeah.
in your van and do the gig, um, then you're not making the kind of income that you normally would during the summer, and that is kind of a big hit because the record labels don't really pay like they used to.
Right. Oh, I think it's interesting. It's a good question. I think it's it's hard to answer that, but I do feel, you know, it will just get more and more, how it has been. It's just so much more saturated now. You have so many amazing artists that can reach people publicly now. Like I think that maybe the days of one big giant pop star may be done, because
Mm-hmm.
there's so many little niche markets, or niche, groups that like different sort of, you know, non-pop music that I don't maybe the days of a label building up like a Madonna are done,
Yeah,
for better or for worse, I don't know. But you hear about the 60s, 70s, 80s, huge pop stars, you know what I mean? But that was,
yeah.
we didn't have all this saturation of like artists, and it was
Well, the labels,
tailored to build these people
yeah.
up.
Yeah, the labels were the gatekeepers, so they'd have like their Led Zeppelin or you have the Journeys of the world, and they'd have a whole machine with a jet for the band, tour buses, roadies with semis, and they're doing
Right.
these
Yeah.
massive football stadium tours, and they're like, okay, that's the way the industry was, but it really kept a lot of people out. And so now what you
Right.
have is you don't have that kind of elite group of A-level artists. Now you have everybody that was maybe at the entry level or at the niche level, or just like a following, kind of like what the Dead did. Kind of going back. The Grateful Dead were never super big in terms of making money until they did like American Beauty, but they were just a touring band, and it had a
Right.
hit home wherever they went. Um, and that was, because they built a reputation. And I think you see that with bands like Brockhampton, Odd Future, with the whole, the Camp Flogna. You see like bands creating their own collectives and having like-minded bands then build up this collective, and then suddenly they have a community. It reminds me of like the Dead.
Right.
They would build
Right.
these communities, and then that kind of becomes self-fulfilling, and then you have a whole base of people like artists and photographers and musicians and, you know, poets. Everybody's just all in this group of like-minded artists that build these collectives. I think that seems to
Right.
be kind of the future of where things are going, is that that's the power of the art, that's what you do to kind of make your own way.
Yeah, and I think that going along with that, I think that the audience is now in charge. You know what I mean? Like it's more like the demand of the audience than, you know, one artist sort of paving a way to what they want to do, maybe. I don't know. But um, you know, with the yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah, I
But
think the
I
only,
hopefully
yeah,
what
it just seems like the only way for artists to get going out there is like you got to find other ways to get your music. You know, you got to get into collectives, you got to do, you know, licensing, you got to get your
right.
stuff, you know, you got to do merchandise, they do sell T-shirts. It is kind of sad that a band can sell more T-shirts than they do records, um, but that's kind of like what you do, what you got to do. And you know, that's why I got into podcasting, because I actually am doing very, very well on the podcast side. And you know, it's just interesting that in the podcast world, you're getting more you know, funds than you do on your music side.
Right, right. Isn't that
and,
funny?
and yeah, you can do these podcasts, and you monetarily you're getting paid faster than the labor than the, you know, the music system, the system of how
Right.
bands get paid compared to the way podcasters get paid. We get paid faster. We get paid more often, and it's like, you know, okay, so well, that's why I'm doing it as like a side gig, because it's actually more lucrative, and then it's fun.
Right.
But it's like, why can't music do the same thing?
I think it will. I think maybe, you know, go through phases. I don't know. I think that right now everybody's in an information talking phase. You know, there's so many great, you know, podcasts or, you know, I think it's more information all the time, which is which has been entertainment for people right now, you know.
Yeah, it kind of reminds
I
me like
don't
talk
see a lot
radio
of my friends like sitting in the like I do, like sit on my like living room floor playing, you know, an
records.
album at the you know, well, my neighbors are saying, calling the landlord saying, you know, this girl needs to stop, and I'm just sitting on the floor enjoying myself. But like, you know, I think that myself included, it, you know, it's information always right now. It's constantly, you
Yeah, it's
know,
kind of
feeding our
yeah.
soul where maybe music used to do. I don't know.
It seems
Maybe
like, you
I'm
know,
wrong. I mean, don't,
it,
you know, who
yeah.
knows?
I mean, if you think about it, like radio used to be like people listen to like radio plays, like the old Orson Welles like radio plays, and
Right.
and because, you know, that made people feel comfortable and they can kind of zone into it. And it seems like podcasts like the new radio. um,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
people can get into these. You know, some people are doing kind of like radio program type ones, you know, like little theater, and people are doing interview shows and you know, talking about different topics, and people, you know, seem to be drawn to it like talk radio. And it's you know, maybe that's what people need, and that's interesting. But that's why I've been trying to integrate music into it, because I think that is a way to get the bands that, you know, music is like what I'm all about. So trying to help other bands has been my mission.
Right. That's amazing. I love that. I really do.
So are you thinking of working on another project for this year? You said you before you're always like evolving, so you have another set of projects that you're working on right now.
I do. Yeah. I won't say too much about it because I don't want to promise anything, but I do. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So you are that. So maybe if we do another show, we could do a video podcast when that project, you know, reaches fruition. Maybe we could do like a kind of premiere project broadcast where we do a
I would love that. That would be great.
video podcast version. Because then sometimes what we can do is, you got like YouTube, we can kind of seg and run to YouTube
Right.
and talk about it. On the video podcast, we have the ability to actually play people's YouTube videos or the Vimeo videos or something. We can do that. So yeah, we could actually, you know, kind of premiere your stuff.
That would be great. Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking to, you know, release in the next couple months another one. So That would be amazing.
Yeah, that to give us a chance to try it. We have tried it for our own stuff just to see how it would work, and so we've kind of kicked the bugs out of it. But yeah, so we always try our own stuff first.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it's interesting, the work you're doing, and we really like it. We think people should check you out. The cool thing about our podcast is we do have the hyperlinks to your work. So we will have your Instagram link and your Spotify link active on our and clickable. And we are on 11 podcast platforms, including Spotify, which we're part of. Anchor is actually part of Spotify. And
Great.
this will be on Apple. It will be on Anchor FM, and it will be on like other platforms as well, like Overcast and Stitcher, and many, many more. So
Great.
we'll
Great.
we'll send you the top links for like Anchor, Apple, and Spotify. And we also have pretty cool integration with Instagram, where we can create a highlight, and that highlight will go directly to the Spotify version of this podcast. So that
Awesome.
we will put that on our channel, and then you can take it as well and set it up on yours, and it allows people to directly go right to the podcast.
Oh yeah, I'll check that out. Or
Yeah,
I'll
we'll have that up within an hour.
okay,
But
cool.
yeah, so we'll let you know. But yeah, it's great having you on the show. We
Thank you
hope
so
everybody.
much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, Liza Oppenheimer, we thank you for being on the show, and like everybody, go to her Spotify, check it out. Make sure that you download and listen and forward and support the artists you love. In this time, do everything you can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being on the program.
Thanks.